We want to take you now to the Pentagon, where Deputy Pentagon Press Secretary Sabrina Singh is speaking with reporters.
The names of those soldiers who lost their lives were Sergeant William Rivers, Specialist Kennedy Sanders, and Specialist Breonna Moffett, all of whom were assigned to the 718th Engineer Company, a U.S. Army Reserve unit based out of Fort Moore, Georgia. These three fallen heroes were deployed to Jordan in support of Operation Inherent Resolve and the international coalition working to ensure the lasting defeat of ISIS. These brave Americans and their families are in our prayers, and the entire Department of Defense mourns their loss. We also pray for the speedy recovery of those who were injured. 8 personnel who received injuries required medical evacuation from Jordan to the Baghdad Diplomatic Support Center. 3 of those patients are scheduled for imminent transport to Landstuhl Regional Medical Center for follow-on care. The other 5 have been assessed for mild TBIs and are expected to return to duty. We are still assessing what happened and how a one-way attack drone was able to impact the facility. U.S. Central Command continues to investigate this attack, and for operation security and force protection reasons, we're not going to discuss further specifics or measures we're taking to prevent such actions or future attacks. But we do know that Iran-backed militias are responsible for continued attacks on U.S. forces in the region. And as the President and the Secretary have stated, we will not tolerate continued attacks on American forces, and we will take all necessary actions to defend U.S. military men and women forward deployed. And we will do so at a time and place of our choosing. Now, over the weekend, the Secretary received regular updates on the attack against U.S. forces and participated in a briefing with the President and his national security team. Today, Secretary Austin returned to work at the Pentagon. This morning, he hosted the NATO Secretary General for a bilateral meeting where they discussed the war in Ukraine, the next NATO summit, and ways to further strengthen transatlantic security. He also met with President Biden at the White House, and later today will host again the NATO Secretary General alongside Secretary Blinken and the National Security Advisor. Additionally, the Secretary is tentatively scheduled to visit Walter Reed National Military Medical Center this evening for a follow-up appointment. As his doctors said in their statement on Friday, Secretary Austin continues to recover well and is expected to make a full recovery following his treatment for prostate cancer. And with that, I'd be happy to take your questions. Thank you. Lita. Yes.
Thanks, Sabrina. A couple things. Number one, since Secretary Austin has now returned to the building, can you tell us whether or not we will be able to see him in the briefing room this week?
I don't have, sorry, go ahead.
You want to get that first? Go ahead.
Sure. I don't have an update just yet, but it's something that we're certainly working towards, and we'll keep you updated.
Okay. And then secondly, can you give us an update on the number of wounded and any breakdown between Air Force and Army on that? And also, any update on the perpetrators of the attack? There's been a lot of chatter about KH. Can you tell us whether that is the leading suspicion right now?
Sure. So on the number of injuries, right now we assess that there are more than 40 that have been injured. We do expect that number to continue to fluctuate as our service members, as you know, with TBI, report symptoms later on, so that number could continue to grow. In terms of attribution for the attack, we know this is an IRGC-backed militia. It has the footprints of Kataib Hezbollah, but not making a final assessment on that. Our teams here are continuing to do the analysis, but we know that Iran is behind it, and certainly, as we've said before here in this briefing room, Iran continues to arm and equip these groups to launch these attacks, and we will certainly hold them responsible.
Just clarification, you said you know Iran is behind it. You know that Iran or Iranian leaders were actually behind this attack, as in planned, coordinated, or directed it?
We know that Iran certainly plays a role with these groups. They arm and equip and fund these groups. I don't have more to share in terms of an intelligence assessment on if leaders in Iran were directing this attack, but what I can tell you is that we know these groups are supported by Iran, and therefore they do have their fingerprints on this, but I can't tell you more in terms of who directed the attack. Jen.
Sabrina, did this drone take off from an IRGC base in Syria?
I don't have more on the point of origin just yet of where this attack originated from.
And was it human error that failed to recognize that this was an Iranian drone coming to the base?
It's something that Central Command is looking into to find out exactly what happened. As I mentioned at the top, they're doing the assessment on this. They're working through what they need to do to make sure our service members, whether being in Jordan, Iraq, and Syria, are further protected. But I just don't have more to share at this time.
Lastly, what kind of drone struck the base? Is this the same kind of Iranian drone being used by the Russians in Ukraine?
That's something that we're looking at right now. We're assessing the drone, but I don't have more to share just yet. Idris.
Just to follow up, you said Iran was behind the attack. So what does that mean? Have you seen evidence of financing or directing anything specific to this attack, not just generally, but specifically?
So maybe I need to clarify further from what Lita had mentioned. We know that Iran funds these groups, like Kataib Hezbollah. We know that these IRGC-backed militias are the ones responsible for attacks on our troops in Iraq and Syria. Beyond that, we're doing an intelligence assessment. We don't have. I can't give you today that.
This attack, linking it to Iran.
We just know that Iran funds these groups, like Kataib Hezbollah and other groups that have attacked our forces. But I don't have more to share on.
General matter, you're saying, right?
As a general matter, yes.
And the second thing is, you've talked about how the conflict is contained, the Gaza-Israel conflict is contained. Now that U.S. troops have been attacked in another country, are you willing to say that the conflict is no longer contained and it's spreading?
I wouldn't say that the conflict is spreading in that we've seen over 100 attacks on U.S. forces, unfortunately, over 100 attacks on U.S. forces in Iraq and Syria and, of course, now in Jordan. We don't want to see a widening of this conflict. We don't see this conflict widening as it still remains contained to Gaza. But this attack was certainly escalatory in that it killed three of our U.S. service members. And as the president has said, we don't seek conflict. We don't want to see a widening of a regional war, but we will respond at a time and place of our choosing.
It's not spreading when troops literally have died in another country.
Yeah. Well, again, but they've also been launching these attacks since October 17th. And again, we can't discount the fact that these attacks are incredibly dangerous, put our service members at risk, but they have not, up until yesterday, inflicted lethal harm. They have been predominantly minor injuries and minor damage to infrastructure. Yeah, Missy.
I want to ask if you could address the broader trajectory for American forces in Iraq and Syria, and will these attacks affect the ongoing discussions between the United States and the government of Iraq about the future of the American presence there? Or, there have been some reports that the United States is reviewing plans for the future troop presence in Syria. Can you talk about how this will or will not impact those deliberations?
I think what you're referring to is the Higher Military Commission that we discussed last week. So we're focused on working with our Iraqi partners regarding how to respond to the attack that claimed 3 U.S. service members. We remain committed to the HMC process and will continue to focus on it at the appropriate time. I don't have anything to preview on troops levels or changes in Iraq and Syria, but we are committed to the HMC process, and that is ongoing.
But could you just say, would I be right to say that this lethal attack on American forces and the potential for a response, which President Biden has kind of foreshadowed explicitly, would you say that it will not have an impact on U.S. plans for the troop presence in Iraq and Syria, or is it too soon to say that?
Well, I think it's too soon to say that. And also I would say that you have to remember that the HMC was already happening and was something that was announced back in August of 2023. The attacks on October 7th did delay some of those conversations from happening and the discussions from starting with the HMC, but we're still committed to that process. We're still committed to working with the Iraqi government, and we are going to continue to do so, but I don't have anything more to preview on what that means for our force levels. Yeah, Megan.
Can the Pentagon confirm any of the reports that the reason the drone wasn't shot down is because the troops on the ground thought that it was a returning American drone?
Yeah, I've seen those reports. Again, that's something that Central Command is assessing right now, but I don't have more to share at this time.
So to follow up on that, you say that this is escalatory because troops have now died in these attacks, but it's not a spread even though it happened in a different country. Is there any indication that this attack, either the equipment or the way it happened, any of that, was a different kind of attack than what we've been seeing in Iraq and Syria, or was it simply an escalation and people died because they weren't able to shoot it down? They didn't detect it the way that they are in Iraq and Syria.
To my knowledge, there was nothing different or new about this attack that we've seen in other facilities that house our service members. Unfortunately, this attack was successful, but we can't discount the fact that other attacks, whether it be Iraq or Syria, were not intended to kill our service members. It is a true tragedy that 3 of our service members died. And of course, Central Command is looking into what can be done when it comes to our air defenses and looking into this incident to determine how best we can move or how best we can further strengthen our air defense systems.
Was this base less well protected than other bases in Iraq and Syria?
Not to my knowledge. Jeff.
Thank you. Can you talk a little bit more about what this unit was doing in Jordan? And also, you have said that Iran has backed these groups which have launched these attacks. Is this attack that has killed 3 service members an act of war by Iran?
Well, look, I think I said this earlier. We don't seek a war with Iran. We don't seek to widen this conflict. We have said, and we will continue to call out, the fact that Iran does fund and equip these groups and provide them the capabilities that they use to attack our service members, whether it be Iraq, Syria, or Jordan. So we're not going to hesitate in calling that out. But we certainly don't seek a war. And frankly, we don't see Iran wanting to seek a war with the United States. We are there in Iraq and in Syria, and I think your original question was, what were these service members doing there? They are there in support of the Defeat ISIS mission. That is their purpose there. They are part of a named operation that this department has and is committed to in both in Iraq and Syria. And so, yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
If I could follow up, how is this not a regional war now between the United States and Iranian proxies in Yemen, Iraq, Syria, and now Jordan?
We're not discounting that tensions are high in the region by any means. Since October 17th, we've seen repeated attacks on U.S. forces. So we're not discounting the fact that tensions are high, that these Iranian-backed groups are targeting our military members with the intention of trying to kill them. But we don't seek a war. We don't want to see this widen out into a broader war. And that's, again, attacks on our service members happening in Iraq and Syria. To bring it back and to look at what's also happening in the Red Sea, we don't seek a wider war there either, but we are going to respond when it comes to commercial ships or our partners' vessels being targeted and therefore jeopardizing international trade and putting at risk innocent mariners. So again, we don't seek war, but we will take action and respond to attacks on our forces. Janie.
Thank you, Sabrina. 2 questions, one on North Korea, one on Russia. And North Korea launched another submarine, launched cruise missile into the east coast yesterday. Do you assess that North Korea's continued negative actions will lead to vital military action?
Yeah, thanks, Janie. So we're monitoring these activities, and we won't comment on intelligence, but we've been very clear on the threat posed by the DPRK and their military programs, and our commitment to the Republic of Korea and Japan continues to be ironclad.
Russia, Russian Defense Ministry spokesman criticized the United States, saying that the U.S. is dragging South Korea into the Ukraine conflict. Then he warned that if South Korea supported Ukraine, he would stop relations with South Korea.
Yeah, I think quite to the contrary. You see countries all around the world supporting Ukraine's cause in the fight for their democracy and the fight for their sovereign territory. We're coming up on the 2-year anniversary of Russia invading Ukraine. Russia is seeking help from partners like Iran, like North Korea, to continue to fund itself or support itself in its war against Ukraine. And you're seeing like-minded nations like the United States and other countries stand in alliance in support of a democracy and in support of a sovereign country who was invaded by its neighbor, unjustly invaded by its neighbor. And we're very proud of the coalition that we've built in support of Ukraine.
What's the total number of attacks now since October and the total number of injuries?
Yeah, just a sec here. So from October 17th to January 29th, we are tracking approximately 165 attacks. That's 66 in Iraq, 98 in Syria, and of course, the one yesterday in Jordan. Oh, and I'm sorry, and on injuries, I am tracking approximately 80 U.S. personnel have received non-serious injuries since the attacks began.
And then have there been any attacks today, and where?
I believe there was an attack earlier today. I don't have the exact location. We can get you that. I don't want to speculate, but we can get you that information after. Yes, right over here.
Thanks. You said just above 160 attacks. Just this month, there's been a little over 50. So there had been around 114 or 15 from October, I guess, 17th to the end of last year. So, and you guys have responded, the U.S. has responded to a few of these attacks. But in order to deter, and that came out in statements from the Secretary and from other U.S. officials. These attacks have continued. Now they've escalated not just into the Red Sea, now into Jordan, a third country. The deterrence does not seem to have worked yet. Is the department considering altering or reviewing its policy in order to deter these Iran-backed militias from injuring and or killing more U.S. troops?
Yeah, that's ultimately a decision that the president is going to make. And as I read out earlier, he has convened his national security team, frequently within these past few days. I'm not going to get ahead of any decisions that the president and the secretary make on this together. But certainly, as our statement said yesterday, we are committed to responding, and we will do so at a time and place of our choosing.
Just a second
Sure.
to go to Israel and Gaza. Reports in recent days suggested that the Biden administration, including officials from the Pentagon, have become more and more frustrated with the civilian death toll, and there are considerations of reviewing what types of weapons, weapon sales, to review those to Israel. I know FMF and separate part of State Department, but does the Pentagon share that assessment? Does the Pentagon share that frustration of too many civilian casualties in Gaza?
I think we've been pretty clear that we don't want to see any innocent lives lost in this war. And we've been very clear, both publicly and privately, with our Israeli counterparts that innocent lives need to be protected. Humanitarian corridors need to be opened. Humanitarian aid needs to continue to flow through. Of course, we're concerned by the death toll in Gaza. We don't want to see continued Palestinians get caught in the crossfire, and we've continued to urge Israel to protect those innocent civilians, and we'll continue to do so. Will.
Just clarification on the number of injured. The 80 includes those from the most recent attack or not?
It does not. I'm sorry.
Okay. And then has Tower 22, that facility, been targeted previously, either during the Israel-Hamas war or prior to that in recent years?
I can't speak to before October 7th, but since October 17th, when these attacks have happened, no, Tower 22, to my knowledge, has not been the target. But as you know, there is the Al-Tanf garrison is right on that border, so attacks have come pretty close to Tower 22, but nothing that has landed on the Jordanian side. Impacts have always been on the Syrian side, except for the attack that happened yesterday. Great, Natasha.
Thanks, Sabrina. So previous drone and rocket attacks that have struck or landed near military facilities in Iraq and Syria, they have not caused anywhere near as much damage, nowhere near as many casualties. Is there an assessment of why this particular drone caused so much, over 40 people injured, 3 killed? What was different about this drone? Or what was different about the facility that it didn't have the kind of protection that other bases do?
I think what was different about this attack is where it landed. It did impact in where living quarters are, and I believe so. I believe it was pretty early morning, so people were actually in their beds when the drone impacted. But in terms of, we've seen these types of attacks before. We're certainly, that's something that Central Command is looking into, on how they can better refine not only our air defenses, but prevent future attacks like this from happening again. Yeah, over here. I'm going to go over here and then come back. Yeah.
You've been listening to Deputy Pentagon Press Secretary Sabrina Singh talk to reporters and take their questions at the Pentagon. The biggest news is that Singh released the names of the 3 U.S. service members killed in that one-way drone attack at the U.S. base in Jordan, Tower 22, as it's known, yesterday. They are Sergeant William Rivers, Specialist Kennedy Rivers, and Specialist Breonna Moffett, all of the Army Reserve.
Singh says U.S. Central Command continues to investigate the attack. She also says right now there are more than 40 who were injured. More than 40. That's higher than the numbers we learned earlier this morning. But the number could continue to grow given a series of injuries. Singh says, quote, "We know Iran is behind it and the U.S. will hold them accountable." Again, the names are William Rivers, Kennedy Sanders, and Breonna Moffett.
So for more on what we just heard and what we know, I want to bring in CBS News national security correspondent David Martin at the Pentagon. David, I think you were listening along with us there. The age range of these 3 soldiers is significant. It's 46 years old for William Rivers, all the way down to 24 years old, I think, for Kennedy Sanders. The fact that they were all, it's Breonna Moffett, actually 23, and then Kennedy Sanders, 24. The mixed gender, mixed ages, what does that tell you about the circumstances they were in, or does it tell you anything more about the attack itself?
Well, it tells you a couple of things about the U.S. Army. These were Army reservists. They were assigned to what the Defense Department now calls Fort Moore, Georgia, which used to be Fort Benning, Georgia, before they changed the names from Confederate names to more modern names. They were there in Tower 22, just across the border from Syria, inside Jordan, as part of a unit of about 350 soldiers and airmen who support special operations forces that are operating inside Syria. There's a base of special operators about 15 miles north of where they're located inside Syria, and one of their principal missions is to keep that base, called Atamf, supplied and to rotate personnel in and out of there. And of course, we now know from the events which led to this drone attack, which killed 13, that they also operate drones out of there to conduct surveillance missions inside Syria. And what happened in this case was that a friendly American drone was returning to base after the completion of a mission. They had to deactivate some of the air defenses in order for that drone to be able to land safely. And then several minutes later, this enemy drone, this drone fired by an Iranian-backed militia, came in, and it came in very low, and it just was not detected and was not shot down. And you heard the Pentagon spokesperson say that many of the troops were still in their beds when it struck.
David, I'm curious about just the logistics of it all. How unlikely is it that this was perhaps a coincidence? Would these militias have the kind of technology to know when these would be intercepted or not? I mean, when they would turn off the technology to allow for the drone to come in?
Well, that's a question that's under debate right now within the U.S. military. For an enemy plane or aircraft, including a drone, to follow a friendly plane or aircraft back to its base and hope to sneak in without getting shot at because people on the ground thought it was friendly, that's a pretty old tactic in warfare. But whether or not these militias had the technology to know that they had a window there when this returning drone came back, I do not know. I don't think that's been determined. But look, the interval here was not seconds. There was several minutes transpired between the landing of the friendly drone and the detonation of the enemy drone. So whatever they had done to make it safe for the friendly drone to land, probably there was time to put the system back up on full alert and be ready for any enemy drone. And for reasons we do not know yet, That did not happen.
And very quickly, let me just, I forgot to ask something that I'm very curious about. I think people want to understand. This certainly is an escalation. Do you see this as, was the militia intentionally escalating the situation, or is this kind of a, why would they be attacking the base? Or is this typical?
Well, in first place, I think we should all understand that this was going to happen sooner or later. There have been 165 attacks against troop locations in Iraq and Syria, and now one in Jordan. It's been a combination of good defense and good luck that has kept everybody alive up until that strike over the weekend. Whether they picked this for, in the hope that this base, which had not been under a constant threat of attack, might be on a lower state of alert, I don't know. I think that is certainly a possibility. But there have been times in the past where the U.S. has narrowly averted serious casualties. I remember one drone strike on a base in which the drone clipped a flagpole, and it otherwise had been headed straight for the operations center. It clipped the flagpole, and it was deflected, and so there was not a direct hit. Every time you fire a rocket, a missile, or a drone loaded with explosives into a military base, you're doing it with evil intent. And this time, whether they got lucky or they got smart, it worked.
Yeah. You know, David, the White House is, or Joe Biden himself, President Biden, is considering, as we speak, what the appropriate response should be. We have a picture of the president here in the Situation Room. This is from today. This was put out on the platform X by the White House. Two things stood out in the press conference we just heard that I want to ask you about. The Pentagon was very hesitant to acknowledge that this new attack on U.S. forces in Jordan, a new country where he had not been attacked prior, that they didn't want to characterize that as an expansion. And they also, while they were holding Iran generally accountable for these militia attacks because they backed the militias, they were not going to acknowledge that they had new intel to unveil saying Iran directed this particular attack. It seems like the White House and the Pentagon are trying to keep their options as open as possible and not box themselves into the most severe sort of reaction. I'm just curious how you read that do-si-do and what you think is on the table realistically. What's the range of possible responses?
Well, the statement by the Pentagon spokesperson, we know that Iran is behind it, is pretty definitive. That doesn't mean, she went on to explain, that Iran ordered and directed this particular attack. But Iran is the enabler of all these attacks because it arms and trains and funds these groups, and these attacks simply would not be possible without Iranian support. And, of course, Iran is egging them on at the same time. So I think you put it exactly right, keeping its options open. The U.S. doesn't want to get involved in a debate about whether this one particular strike had been ordered or supported or suggested, whatever term you want to use, by Iran. Iran was behind it, and that is their going-in position. So what does the U.S. do about it? Obviously, the U.S. is going to conduct a retaliatory strike. The president has said that in fairly explicit terms. So how do you conduct a strike that actually might convince Iran to back off? There are Iranian facilities inside Iraq and Syria that can be attacked, and that most officials here in the Pentagon believe would be the most effective way of doing damage directly to Iran without actually having to attack Iran, which would, of course, run the danger of setting off a much wider war that nobody wants.
Steve, go ahead.
Once in November of last year, the U.S. did attack facilities, training areas belonging to the Iranian Revolutionary Guards that were located in Syria. So they have gone directly after Iranian targets in Syria before.
Just not inside
obviously,
Iran.
But obviously it did not stop further attacks.
Why not? You're right. There was a training facility. I think a safe house, maybe one other Iran-linked location that they had hit. Why aren't we talking about the possibility of taking out an Iranian ship, perhaps the one reportedly supporting the Houthis in their attacks on that shipping channel there in the region? Is that on the table?
Every time I ask about that, everybody sort of recoils from the thought and says simply that would be an act of war,
Right.
and it would be attacking the ship of a sovereign nation, no matter what it's up to in international waters, would be an act of war, and I think the Biden administration would be loath to take that step.
David Martin,
Wow.
we appreciate all of those
Nobody
insights
better,
so
David
much.
Martin.
Nobody
Thank you.
better. It's really making
Good
us
thing.
understand all of the implications. Appreciate you.